Good afternoon. I'm Mrinali. Thank you for joining us in this series of events the British Council is hosting on the lead up to COP26. The United Kingdom will host the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland from the 1st to 12th November 2021. The summit will bring together over 30,000 delegates from around the world, including heads of state, climate experts, and campaigners, to agree coordinated action to tackle climate change. Through hashtag The Climate Connection, the British Council is working to bring young people around the world together to address climate change. The Climate Connection is a global platform for dialogue, cooperation, and action against climate change. It will connect more than 200 million people from the UK and the rest of the world through creative solutions to the climate emergency. It puts young people at the center of the climate change solutions. You can discover how we can address climate change together at www.britishcouncil.org/climate-connection. The hashtags are COP26, the Climate Connection, climate change, together for our planet. Change can only happen when all of us, and especially young people, are actively involved, collaborating and innovating across borders and generations. We hope that with this series of programs, we can bring together people passionate about making a difference to inspire and bring action to their communities. Before we begin, let me remind you to please put your questions and your comments in the chat section. There's a public chat section. Please use that because we have a very dynamic group of young people and they will be happy to take your questions and listen to your comments or read your comments and respond to them. So please do engage and join in the conversation. So to introduce my guests today, they call themselves the Parrotfish Collective. The Parrotfish Collective is a group of conservation professionals and wildlife enthusiasts that work as conservation communicators. Using a multitude of interdisciplinary skills, they develop engaging educational content that bridges the gap between conservationists on the front lines and the public. Through their work, they recommunicate science in visually engaging and creative ways. Their mission is to inspire and empower communities with knowledge, thereby raising the eco-literacy rates of the public. Their aim is that this will provide the impetus to achieve long-lasting behavioral change. Through their work, they hope to create an informed public that can be mobilized towards environmental protection. Joining us today from the Parrotfish Collective, we have Vinod Malvata. Vinod is a conservationist who lives seasonally between the east and southern coasts of the island. With an interest in converging conservation and development, his primary interest lies in working with fringe communities to protected areas. At present, he is the executive director of the Lanka Environmental Fund, LEF, a conservation charity that acts as a catalyst for change between global players, local conservation groups, and the concerned public. His previous work includes operating as the project coordinator for the Rewilding of Tourism, the RFT project, under the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, and as co-founding project manager for Wasteless Arugambe, WLAB. He co-founded the Parrotfish Collective in 2019. Vinod, can we have Vinod on, please? Vinod, thank you so very much. Hi, and thank you for accepting our invitation, and welcome to the British Council. So we look forward to hearing from you and about the Parrotfish Collective. So I won't take up any more time. It's all yours.
Cool. Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome.
So what are we doing today? So we're going to talk about the conversation, which is environmental communication for conservation and social change in the age of the digital media. So who are we? Minali gave us a very interesting introduction, like the more formal one, but who are we really? We kind of think of ourselves as we're really a eclectic group of individuals that are, very passionate about the environment. That's what drives us all to come together to work together on issues. We're based in different places. Some of us in Colombo, some in the south. A few of us here on the East Coast. There's a couple of the team that live abroad as well, studying abroad. And you'll hear more from our team as we go on. So we're a group of conservation professionals and wildlife enthusiasts, but our main work is we work as conservation communicators. So when we like macro out, actually, when we look at some of the topical conservation issues in Sri Lanka, the marine space, Sri Lanka has a exclusive economic zone 8 times the size of its landmass, and a territorial sea of almost 21,000 square kilometers. So the marine space around Sri Lanka there's a lot of conservation that needs to happen, as well as a lot of resources out there. As we know, the Express Pearl is happening right now, and the disaster from that is everyone knows about it. It's widespread, and it'll have repercussions of it will be felt for years to come by the local communities in those areas, as well as the ecosystems that have been involved in that. So marine pollution, marine destruction, unsustainable fishing practices such as bottom trawling and dynamite fishing are some of the main issues in the marine space. And then we have the terrestrial space, which is on land, and we've got deforestation rates very high, the human-wildlife conflict that includes the human-elephant conflict, but also you've been seeing an increase in leopard-related deaths, as well as fishing cats, road kills, and recently it actually came to our attention about a human-otter conflict that was very interesting and something that we really want to unpack over these next few months as we look into it. But then there's the spread of invasive alien species. That's another issue, as well as ineffective waste management. As we can see in the picture, that is a dump very close to where we live here in the East Coast. Moved around freely. Elephants move through there. More on that later, because Yannick will be sharing some pictures about it. So why do we exist? So we actually came together to try to we realized that there was a lot of science available in Sri Lanka, a lot of researchers on the front lines working very hard, but a lot of the great stuff that they were doing wasn't coming out to the public in accessible formats. They come out in the science article that's very heavy to read, or like sometimes in papers. So we kind of thought about it and said, how could we recommunicate science in more engaging ways? So on the left, the one of Sri Lanka, what we see is Sri Lanka actually complaining how we've lost forest cover over the last few years. So that is a cartoon we've created to talk about that you'll see as our presentation moves on, how we weave these in. And then the second one would be to inspire and empower communities with knowledge. That's one of the main things we want to do, because we want people to be, the more knowledgeable people are, the more they'll want to be inspired to conserve what's this beautiful country that we all live in. And then the third one is the impetus to achieving long-lasting change. So in Sri Lanka, like how we kind of view it is conservation and development need to be almost married together, because we're a very small country endowed with a lot of natural beauty, as well as biodiversity. We're a biodiversity hotspot in the world, one of 35. So it's like, how do we merge these two together and achieve, we'll say, development as well, but also in line with conserving our ecosystems? How do we do that? So that's some of the things we talk about through our content as well. So this is some of our work. This is some of our work that we've done with Kumula National Park, and this is what we talk about when we talk about recommunicating science in more engaging ways. So this is a visitor center guide that we've developed for Kumula National Park, and there's sides to it, but this one side where you see it's cartoon renditions of animals placed in the landscape, and we went in and actually worked on the ground with the Department of Wildlife Trackers at Kumana to come up with these. They gave us, and it was a very interactive process where they gave us anecdote stories, and then we got that corroborated by experts in the field, and then we come up with this where, you know, the idea behind this is actually, so if you go to Kumana and if you don't see a leopard or a bear, you still walk away with a wealth of knowledge, because there is so much to be seen in Sri Lanka, and so much to learn about. So for example, in this one, the shama here on the right hand side, it's one of the most trafficked birds in the world, for its song capabilities. So someone going away to the national park and then coming back and learning even a little bit of tidbit of information does inspire people. So that's what we're trying to do here, recommunicating it in really engaging ways, but visually pleasing, as well as giving people more knowledge. So this is another example. This is an example of how we try to empower some of the communities. So this, we raised funding through some art exhibitions, and we took the Department of Wildlife Conservation Kumuna trackers who are based, who take people out on safari. Actually, we took them to Lawn Wild Safaris, who was kind enough to offer us their facilities, and we had a 4-day training for the boys from Kumuna. And interestingly, this was the first training that these volunteers who'd been with the department for almost 5 years at the Kumuna entrance, this was the first one that they had of this nature, and they were very keen to learn, and they came away, and now they're using a lot of these skills in the field. So it's really nice to see the boys as well taking this on and really getting out there, taking the knowledge that they got and passing that on to people who come to the park. So in keeping with that, we did a jungle shirt campaign, and this is what we talk about, the impetus to achieve long-lasting change. So what we did is, once we built a community online as well, people who are interested in what parrotfish do know, we actually recently ran a campaign where it was buy one shirt and donate one to a national park employee at Kumana, as you can see here. And we were very lucky to raise 70. We sold more than 70 shirts, which was enough to give each Kumana wildlife employee a long sleeve shirt and a short sleeve shirt. And that was all achieved by us, by our public engagement with the public. So it's like that was another way for the public who do engage with Parrotfish Collective and who want to give back, mainly to the people who are on the ground, to give back. So what we try to do is raise that eco-literacy and also allow people an option to actually come back and give something back. So that's kind of it from me, Minali, for now. And we'll be moving on to Yannick, who'll kind of go through imagery and how we use photography as part of our work. So over to Yannick.
Thank you, Vinod. Yes, and our next guest is Yannick Tissera, who spent much of his free time in the wilderness spaces of Sri Lanka as a child. He has always had an affinity for the great outdoors, wildlife, and the allure of the natural world. It is with this lens that he saw the opportunity to use photography as a form of storytelling to foster change and maintain awareness in wild spaces. With a degree in commercial photography and the unrelenting desire to return to the jungle, the Parrotfish Collective is the platform from which he is delving deeper into inspiring environmental protection and appreciation. Could we please have Yannick on screen? Yannick is out in Hikkaduwa. Hi, Yannick. Lovely to see you again. Welcome. Hi, and welcome to the British Council. It is such a pleasure to meet you and be working with you on this. Vinod said you have lots of stories to tell, so maybe I should just let you get on with it. Yeah?
Thanks so much, Minali. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me today. Yeah, I do have a few stories to tell. The one I will make an example of today is that of my study on the human-elephant conflict. Thanks again for having me. I think I'd like to start off by saying, well, basically, I visit the jungles quite often, and whenever I am in the jungle environment, I've got my camera on hand. I'm like a birder with his binoculars, always in need of them. Having said that, I'm not always making imagery that I reckon I can keep. And that's because taking images is, in fact, a difficult thing to do. After all, if you think about it, you only have really one moment to make it happen. You observe, you frame, focus, get your creative settings together, reframe, and then capture. A writer can write and then rewrite over the course of hours or days, in fact. Whereas a cartoonist, for example, has the ability to erase and recolor, Control Z, if you know what I mean. Most often than not, though, photographers only get one chance. So we have one chance to picture accurately and convey reality in a palpable manner. That is, our images need to be visually pleasing in all the technical ways a photographer might have been taught or has learnt. That is, composition, lighting, subject, depth, and color. They all need to be miraculously intact to achieve a successful image and thus tell a story. But the story is not always possible to tell in just one image, right? So over many years of living on the East Coast, I'm fortunate also to live out where Vinod is currently. I've been able to document an issue that the Parrotfish Collective is sure to continue to talk about, and that is the subject of the human-elephant conflict, which is very real, and it continues to get worse. So the space in which we're talking about is extremely unique, and there are varied areas in that space, including the Kumla National Park, which is to the south, Lahula National Park to the north, but also includes forest department areas such as the Kumbukang Conservation Forest, the Panama Kudumagala Sanctuary, and it's these forest department spaces that tend to border communities. And as these communities expand, encroachment into these areas take place. I thought this image over here highlights the proximity of habitation to protected areas quite well. So I'd like to talk about my process of photographic storytelling, how I try to communicate, and why it's important for us to keep shooting. All right, so here I am out in the field, right? The sketchbook of possibilities in front of me. It's like putting pencil to paper. I can quite literally point my camera wherever I want and take 100 photos without thinking. Mind you, I'm outside of a park here, and I'm extremely mindful of how close I am to, or giving space to the subject I'm photographing. So thinking is exactly what I need to be doing here. I need to be thinking and asking myself, what is it going to take to convey this story of the human-elephant conflict, right? The most important element, I believe, is the ability to evoke emotion in imagery. The photograph needs to communicate with the viewer. Now, I saw this particular herd moving from right to left, and I saw the baby amongst it, and I wanted to show the baby elephant's vulnerability. So I picked a spot to my left that was low to the ground, or in other words, at the baby's eye level, to try and communicate its vulnerability through its parents' legs and framed underneath the bush or the jungle that protects it. And perhaps maybe I melted a few hearts doing so. It could be curiosity or joy, or heartwarming happiness. Elephants, we know, are intelligent, social animals, and there was so much of the social behavior happening, but I thought that this frame, this picture, encompassed it in its totality. It was just so perfect of this moment between these two elephants, and what are they saying to one another? It could be anger, disbelief, or sadness. If I'm achieving an emotional response, then I'm communicating. Now, this image, I can't say for sure how it was that this elephant passed away, but it's most likely, though I wouldn't like to believe it, that it was a gunshot wound to the head, which is evident on that skull. The fact of the matter is that it's lying in a human-made paddy field, and that is rather close to home. So taking a picture, I think, is one thing, but making a photo that inspires others, one that is beautiful to look at and is deeply alluring or intriguing, where the viewer is left wanting more, requires a little more patience. I believe, or rather I think great photographers are all great observers first. To get the photo, one needs to be engaged with their subject. Because as I said, more often than not, you only have one chance at making that picture. The subjects I'm speaking of will then move at their own free will. There may only be a certain frame that might make sense in the sequence of events, and you need to be ready for it. A good shot is marked by a combination of luck, intuition, spontaneity, perspective, and subject awareness. Spontaneity in this image is me arriving to this garbage heap with my camera at the ready. I certainly wasn't expecting an elephant to be there. Definitely wasn't expecting this beautiful tusker to be there. Intuition and subject awareness, I understand in which direction the wind is blowing and how the elephant is going to behave given my presence. So where is it that I should be positioning myself that ensures the safety of both my subject and myself? Luck for me in this image is the array of birds. They're not overlapping one another, and they're certainly in a varied stage of flight, and they seemingly frame my subject rather perfectly. Perspective is my choice of lens. I'm shooting a little bit wider open in order to expose the foreground of garbage, as well as the other animals in this scene, the dog and the crows. Well, why take photos of the environment anyway, or the human-elephant conflict for that matter? And can it help in contributing to what organizations such as the Parrotfish Collective set out to do? Well, what it can do is, firstly, it can expose environmental problems like nothing else can. What might seem like a normal practice to many is in fact exacerbating the problem. Farmers burn leftover paddy fields to deter elephants. It's not to replenish soil, not at all. 80 elephants or so are feeding peacefully in this area that you see on the screen, just the evening before. It's the reason that I went back this day, in fact. When food opportunity is removed, elephants can end up venturing closer to village stockpiles. Leaving the leftovers for them to graze and sharing the landscape does in fact do far more good and is the right decision toward human-elephant coexistence. That's why conservation photography is also, that's rather what conservation photography is also about. It's the responsibility to shine a light on issues that might not be understood, and it can't always be pretty. Photos are a universal medium of communication, transcending language and cultural barriers. There's not much I need to say about this image. It's pretty self-explanatory. For these reasons, it's now more important than ever to help save what is left. Technology has continually evolved and shaped the way we see and share the world, and social media is definitely the medium of our time. The most amazing thing about social media is that everyone has access to it, and it is instant. We no longer need to rely on professional photojournalists to get the story to us at all. Today, any of us, any of you who are watching today can do it. You can go out and do it yourself. You don't need to be a published photographer at all. What social media has provided us is the opportunity to add to the conversation and be part of the change. And that's why our work here is extremely important. I thought it might be nice to end with two cartoons. I wish I drew them, but no, I did not. I did, though, work in collaboration with the artist, my good friend and colleague, Zeb Landers, who I'm very excited for you guys to be meeting next, on conceptualizing and writing. I think I'd like to say my photographic exploration on the human-elephant conflict has got me caring more deeply about the issue, and as such has informed me and inspired me to engage in other very powerful communication tools that we at the Parrotfish Collective choose to use. Finally, I think the more you understand and the more you care or feel deeply about your subject, the better you will do when telling the story. Thank you.
I have loads of questions for you afterwards. I'm looking forward to asking them from you.
I hope so.
You do. Yes, I do. I do.
Thank you.
And now we have Zev, as Yannick mentioned. Zev Alandis, a published illustrator and artist with work appearing in print and online. Zev's academic background is in communication studies, and this has enabled him to specialize in cartooning complicated ideas in impactful ways to wide audiences. He is passionate about sharing the wonders and complexity of the natural world to the broader public in fun, inspiring ways that are easy to relate to. Through this form of storytelling, he believes change and the conservation ethic can be inspired in all of us. Can we please have Zev, who joins us from Melbourne? Hi, Zev.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Manali, and nice to meet you all. Yeah, look, my connection to Sri Lanka goes back a couple of years, quite a few years actually, and I think I might start with that if that's okay.
Yes,
so
please.
Today, look, I think the first thing to say is I'm going to take you on the journey of creating cartoons today. So let's jump in and sort of situate how I fit with the Parrotfish Collective, and then we'll go in and draw our own together.
Wow, okay, all yours.
Cool. So my connection to Sri Lanka goes back a few years. We were living in Arugambay, and I kept on getting dragged on these pesky safaris by Yannick and Vinod. And as I'm sure most of the audience knows, after a couple of hours in safari, well, you pretty much fall in love with the place. And that's what happened. And as I've adventured around the island and explored more and spent much time living there, I pretty much fell in love with the wildlife of Sri Lanka. Now, for me, I mean, I'm not there now, and COVID's got a bit to do with it, but I want to be really clear that my philosophy with Parrotfish, or my approach to Parrotfish Collective, is about collaboration and partnerships. When we started up the Parrotfish Collective, I wasn't coming in as a foreigner from abroad with all the answers. The kind of way I looked at it was, okay, I've got a few skills as a cartoonist or an illustrator. I'm learning them. I'm actually learning them, self-taught. And so what I can do is partner with people on the ground, partner with people, give them a voice, give them a platform. And, you know, it's actually all of you, the conservationists, the enthusiasts, the groups on the front lines that are doing the real work that give me the most pleasure to work with. It's your voices that we try to give a platform to. And so it's through this creative collaboration with all of you that gives me the most joy and pleasure, which is why I do what I do. So we all know the power of cartoons. I'm going to share my screen now because you've had enough of looking at me. There we go. And jump on. Cool. So we all know about the power of cartoons. Given our host today being the British Council, I've definitely chosen today's quote correctly from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, I can read the whole thing, but at its core, cartoons have the power to expose our taken for granteds, to raise awareness, the power to shape opinions, to motivate, to evoke emotions. You know, the emotions such as anger and humor, they can really be brought to life through a cartoon. However, as a conservationist, our underlying goal is behavior change. That's really what we want to get out of this. And what does that mean then? For the type of emotions or type of cartoons or symbols we use in our cartoons, or the metaphors we choose to use, if it's all about behavior change? Well, I'd like to start by saying what we don't use. What we don't use. I try to stay away, or we try to stay away from divisive and angry cartoons, stuff that gets people really riled up. Look, I know it feels good to blow off steam every now and again. I mean, me as much as anyone want to get out and bang the drum or throw something at someone, but as an organization, we prefer a more positive, gentle approach, such as making someone giggle when we expose the ridiculousness of the situation, or to feel empathy. We try to take a more gentle approach. The other thing I try to stay away from in our cartoons is evoking shame or guilt. I find that if you patronize people, they go into a defensive mode. And when people are quite defensive or stubborn, you're not going to have a conversation with them. There's not going to be any sort of behavior change and ultimately conservation work happening in that moment. So if those are the things we stay away from, how do we do what we do? Let's have a look at one issue, and that's going to be, or one example, and that will unpack our process. So the example today is the threat to yellowfin tuna. Now, we've partnered here, as I mentioned before, collaboration's at the center of what we do. And we've partnered here with Dr. Steve Creech of Pelagikos. Now, we were guided by him through the research and our brilliant team. Now, you're only meeting 4 of us today, but there's an entire cluster of people, incredibly brilliant people who are involved in Parrotfish Collective. And some of them will engage in this research and distill it down to the core information that we want to communicate and we think is important. So the examples of information I want to use here for our illustration or our cartoon is the fact that yellowfin tuna is at the risk of depletion due to overfishing and climate change. And 80%, that's 80% of yellowfin tuna currently caught in Sri Lanka are immature. So how do we turn that into a cartoon? These are the questions that go on inside my head when I need to take that information and turn it into a visual. So the first question I ask, with a little bit more profanities than it's written here, is why is this situation messed up? Pretty much as soon as I answer that question, we get to the what's the point we want to make section. Then we go through and tick the box. Who are the protagonists? Who are the villains? Who's the audience? Because it's no good drawing a cartoon that is about and for downtown London if we're trying to talk to downtown Porterville, for example. And what emotions, what tone do we want to take? We talked before about trying to avoid patronizing or aggressive or guilt and shaming people because we want to bring them along on the journey, and ultimately we're going for awareness raising and behavior change. So I want you all to take a moment to think about tuna, yellowfin tuna. What would you draw? Okay, you don't have to draw it, I'll do it for you, but what would you draw? I want you to think about what symbols or metaphors you'd use. It's not as easy as it thinks, but it's very much a game of analogies. Trying to think of something that associates or represents. This is kind of like this. I'll show you a real example. This is my sketch page. So for the topic, I created a sketch page. I'll draw it out and I'll send it off to everyone in the group, and we will go through it together. And we work out what's working and what's not. The topics that we thought were kind of working, or the phrases that we thought were working on this, were the idea of shrinking tuna, running out of time or running out, and also tuna as a consumer product or a livelihood for fishermen. So you can see here in the top corner, the red arrow, the shrinking wall trophy. That's a tactic I'll sometimes use with cartoons, and cartoonists will use generally, which is to take a situation and to take it to its most absurd logical conclusion, really exaggerate it. So there we've got the trophies shrinking, 2016, 17, 18, they're getting smaller and smaller. I kind of like that, but the team wasn't so crash hot on it. So we've given that a miss. The other one approach I might try sometimes is the green arrow, which is looking from the perspective of the animals. So there we've got a couple of yellowfin tuna, and unfortunately this one didn't work because I've still got an empty speech bubble with the word saying insert witty comment here. So if it had worked, we'd have a joke out of it, but it didn't. So we'll try something else. And with the group, we'll discuss it, see what's working. The one thing we decided to stay away from on this topic, and it's a good example, is poke bowls, which are tuna salad bowls, which people often will buy as a fresh or healthy alternative to some of the other foods available in restaurants. And the reason we decided to stay away from that, using that as a symbol or a metaphor or a conversation topic, is we didn't want to put people on defensive. We didn't want them to feel shame or anger, or we wanted to engage with them. I didn't want to, I think people are smart. And if you give people options and choices and knowledge, they'll make the good choice themselves. And so I think to stay away from something that would evoke shame and guilt was the right move for this. So here we go. This is one of the 2 that we landed on. We actually picked 2 topics, 2 cartoons for this. This is the sold out cartoon. I think it cuts right to the heart of the issue. It's a pencil sketch, which I did. And we used Adobe, sorry, not Adobe. Wait for it. You can see all the colors happening here. I'm trying to time it to the video, but I guess we should just get into it. I used Procreate to color it in. There we go, sold out. The second cartoon we did was a mini can of tuna, which is another gentle cartoon, pithy, and hopefully inspires the audience to think a little bit more about what they're doing and the choices they make when they buy tuna. I think I spent most of the video working on anatomy, so we might give this one a bit of a miss, but you get an idea of how the creative process happens. So the artwork is then passed on to the team and the all-important comments are written. So you can see here that our creative process is extremely collaborative, both internally within the group and externally, with experts and groups and enthusiasts and organizations such as yourself. But I think to finish up, I want to share a couple of thoughts on working with this medium on social media, because it's really complicated and it's quite a difficult thing to do, because at the moment, social media can be quite divisive. I mean, all politics can be quite divisive, but we're very much in a heightened age of us versus them, silos of social media, echo chambers, we're talking to ourselves. And I think as conservationists, it's really important to talk to a wider audience, to talk across the divide, because that's the changes, or that's where change is really going to happen. So when we share a post, when we create a post, it's not just about raising awareness, but also about effective behavior change. So I kind of want you to think about that next time you jump online and create something, because honestly, I'm not the best artist in the world. I'm kind of learning and stumbling in the dark, trying things out. I'm not that funny, and I don't always get this right. But the philosophy that I bring to the table and I try and create the cartoons with is that it should be about gently exposing the ridiculousness of the situation or an issue through humor. It should be about positively shaping the discourse. It should be about illuminating or subtly hinting at alternative choices, better choices. It should be respectful of our audience's intelligence. It should be thoughtful, it should be accurate, and it should be effective. So next time you jump online, perhaps these are some of the philosophies you want to play with as well, or think about if you're going to engage in online conservation work. However, none of these cartoons would reach you in the right place and right time, or be as effective as they are, without the incredible work of our social media manager, the extraordinaire Tasha. So thank you, everyone, and I'll see you at the question part.
Thank you, Zev. Thank you, Zev. And now I will introduce Tasha. So, and finally, we have Tasha Demel, who is a communication specialist and documentary photographer who uses visual storytelling to create narratives that drive social change and highlight impacts of the environment and climate issues. Tasha grew up around the urban wetlands of Colombo and spent much of her early adulthood exploring the remote corners of this island. These experiences set in motion an ongoing love affair with the wilderness, wilderness and the wildness of this world, and desire to reconnect people to it. Tasha is the founder of Lost in Ceylon, a platform for adventures, storytelling, and activism. She supports the digital and communication strategy as the media and communications manager for the Parrotfish Collective. Tasha is a firm believer in the power of storytelling to create awareness, mobilize support, and inspire action. Tasha, I'm so sorry I stumbled through your introduction, but could we please have you on? Tasha has been liaising with me to bring this program and to make it a reality. So we would love to welcome her to the British Council and for you to meet her even online. Sorry, is Tasha having some... Okay, Vinod, that's fine. Tasha was having some tech issues, I think, connectivity issues. Are you going to take up from her bit as well?
I will, until she jumps back on, I'll just kind of walk through her slides, yeah.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you.
So, hold on, sorry about that. So what we were going to talk about is the power of social media. My program just quit on me, so you'll just have to deal with my face. But what we were going to talk about is the power of social media and how important it is, and how we kind of run campaigns and how we unpack different issues that come up. Hold on one second. Here we go. Yeah. So what we do when we have a strategy, we basically go through different issues, how we unpack it. So here's a strategy that we've used for deforestation. It's a deforestation campaign where we had multi-pronged approaches to it. We had cartoons, as you can see on either side, talking about the biodiversity of country and the ecosystem services, as well as, and then we also did some video content on other state forests for the FEO, the Federation of Environmental Organizations, to raise awareness on Sri Lankan forest issues. So what we, like we talked about earlier, we do creative content, and we do it in very interesting ways. So we partner with the conservationists on the ground, like I spoke about before. So here we have 3 examples that we worked on creative content. So we have the world's largest pangolin, world's biggest pangolin from Sri Lanka. And it's a very interesting way of looking at it, how we've done it, as if you can see. So Zev's really brought on the other 2 species of pangolins that we have, the Indian, the Pakistani, as well as the Sri Lankan one, the largest. It's a humorous way of actually putting something forward. So it's more eye-catching and gets people thinking about things. Did something recently, a Snurdle snow globe. As you all know, the MV Express Pearl is causing a lot of devastation to Sri Lankan beaches, and the nurdles have been washed. The snow globe is normally representative of tourists. When you go abroad, you can pick up one of these snow globes, and it's very representative of the tourist culture. But here, a lot of our tourism could be impacted by the disaster of the Express Pearl. So that is yet another a way of really making people think about an issue in creative ways. The last one we have here on the right is at the Great Elephant Gathering in Min area, and it's another collaborative piece we did with the FEO, and what we looked all invasive coming up and really not allowing any shrub to. So again, we did the animation. One great gathering where it's supposed to be the largest gathering of Sri Lanka invasive alien species was threatening this, and it's going to be a big issue. So we were it was a campaign that we did in coordination, collaboration with FEO, who was doing they were doing a fundraising campaign at the time. So we tried to get it out to people what the ecological importance of this campaign was. So what's the value work we do? So what we do is our primary platform at this moment is English, but we have been trying to break in through Sinhala as well as Tamil media and have our content going out, because that's where we can really create change if we do trilingual content. So here we have something that a video that we did for the Environmental Foundation on Colombo as a Ramsar wetland site, and on the right we have the other state forest issue, a Tamil video that we did. So how do we when we look at the anatomy of a post, what do we do? So as Zev talked about, we have the Yellowfin tuna cartoon that we have, and then we also have the small can. So it's looking at the same issue, but actually having two different posts. So talking here about the ecological issue of it on the right with the small tuna can, how all the been extremely small. He said 80% with juvenile fish, and what does that mean for consumption as well as the future? But then when you look at the sold out cartoon, we talk about a different aspect. So it's breaking down, and all our posts, if you do look in, have very science-based information, and then it goes down into what the repercussions. If we, there's a certain, what I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a certain way how we lay out a post, and how we go down, and what we have. We have a little call to action at the end, and then how we move through and engage with our audience. So this was the call to action I was talking about before. We always try to incorporate that, how you can be involved, and how you can give back to the community that you're a part of, and the greater, the collective we. So this is some work that we did for a coalition that we came together to work on. It was the Protect Vida Nature Reserve campaign. And what that was it was a multi-pronged campaign to conserve what was Sri Lanka's third largest marine protected area. And it's the only marine nature located on the northwestern coast of the country. And it was under threat from a proposed aquaculture project. And aquaculture has harmed a lot of the coastline up this northwestern coast of Sri Lanka. So Parrotfish actually came on board to a coalition of 8 organizations that were working to save this nature reserve. So we used our it was a multi-pronged approach, and used a diversity of skills that we have to actually develop the content for this campaign. So what we had was we had photography. This is aerial photography of abandoned shrimp farms, as you can see here. Then we did an animation, and the animation basically was about the invisible contribution of the mangroves and how it moved through, and how, if you looked at it, one was, I'm really sorry that I can't show you the animation because I haven't downloaded this one, because Tasha was going to be doing it, but it was a movement where you could go through, and the animation was, it would show if you took the mangrove out, what it kind of would look like. And that was actually, the shrimp farms, the abandoned ones kind of look like this. That ecosystem could house so many species, but then you take it out and you create something like this, you're really depleting the ecosystem services you could get, and the mangrove has so much invisible value is what we were trying to get at. Then we also did some cartoons about species that were there in the area. These are different species that are all very important within the ecosystem and have a vital place in the food chain. So we were trying to bring about talk to people about the biodiversity and express how many animals are there, why it's important to conserve this area. And then we also talked about, through infographics, we talked about the mangroves, as well as the invisible contributions. So 14% of the global ocean carbon sequestration, things like that, with numbers that people could actually see and then take away into their lives. So we tried to develop a series of infographics that were actually very helpful for people. And then what it tried to do through this campaign was to actually ensure.
Can you hear me?
Back on.
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, perfect.
Okay. So much for technology.
Thank you.
So let me my screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm not I didn't catch a lot of what Vinod was saying, so apologies if there is repetition. But just to back up maybe very quickly and start from the beginning, I think there was you got a behind the scenes look at the processes that go into sort of creating a lot of the content and the cartoons and the imagery. And, you know, once you have all of that content, it's really important to think about what you can actually do with it. So as part of this presentation, I'll sort of be sharing how you can use social media to amplify your message, but also connect with audiences for shared values. So it's just really important, I think, because social media is a space with so much noise and so much going on, to think about how you can stand out and how you cut through the noise. So essentially, I want to touch on 4 ways that this can be done. And one is through a strategy. So you could have, you know, really beautiful images and really great content. But if you don't have some type of basic strategy guiding your work, you won't be able to tell compelling stories or unpack complex issues and find ways to meaningfully engage with your audiences, especially in the long run. So realizing your objectives early on and using your content to communicate that message is really important. And maybe Vinod touched on this, but there is a method to the madness. At the Parrotfish Collective, we do have a social media and communication strategy that does guide our work. So that really helps, you know, map out thematic content and also look at the conservation issues that we will be covering. But it's also important to remember that plans are great, but you need to be flexible and you have to learn how to adapt. So for example, following the Express Pearl disaster, we, you know, quickly got together and came up with some posts and content in a couple of days. So just knowing, being able to respond to current events and being timely is also important, especially if you're working in this field. And as you've already seen, you know, content plays a really huge role in how we do things at the Parrotfish Collective, and it's really important in helping us cutting through the noise. So we, you've seen a lot of different types of the media that we use. It's not always heavy content. There are empowering messages, there are inspiring messages, you know, that really break from some of the negativity and a lot of like the issues that we see. One thing to always keep in mind is, you know, how your content as well as your writing and your captions will appear when it is published. So this could mean adjusting the dimensions of a post. For Instagram, it could mean adjusting your captions, because on Facebook, for example, you could have longer captions, you can insert links. There's a lot more that you can, you know, put into your caption. And it means, you know, thinking about what type of Instagram stories would accompany a post that you put out. And another way that you can really stand out is by adding value. And this can be, you know, in so many different ways, but it's always important to think about, you know, how are you different, or what are you adding to the conversation that other people aren't, or other groups aren't. So, you know, I won't repeat what's been said, but there is a lot of thought and there are a lot of processes that do go into this in terms of creating the content and making sure that it gets the message across the way that we intend to. So one thing that I will say is that we do try to go beyond the headlines, offering, you know, multiple narratives on an issue, really presenting a nuanced view of something. And by sort of unpacking complex issues into bite-sized pieces, our hope is that, you know, environmental and conservation issues become more accessible to the public. So Zev took you behind the scenes of the Yellowfin tuna post, but I just want to add a little bit more background. So this was originally supposed to be to go out as a single post for World Tuna Day. But as I started, you know, researching this topic and learning more about it, I realized just how much there was to it, and it was really difficult to share as one post. So we had a discussion about it, and we decided to split it up into 2 posts over 2 different days. And this is, an ongoing issue, so there's way more that we still need to cover. But it was also about thinking, how do we present a topic or unpack something without it being too overwhelming. And the last thing that I will sort of end with is call to actions. These are really important. So wherever possible, we try to use call to actions, and these can be really powerful, depending on how you use them, and they can take a variety of forms. So it could mean directing people to go and read more, access a link. It could be signing a petition. It could be donating. It could be asking your audience a question and making them think a little bit differently. So really finding ways to get your audience more engaged and involved, so that it's not just a one-way conversation, but it's also participatory. The Vida Thal campaign, just very quickly, was an example of how we used a lot of what I discussed within one campaign. So as Vinod explained, there were very different elements to it. And really the mixed media aspect of, having cartoons which featured unique species that lived in these ecosystems, having infographics that had key messages and statistics, created a variety of ways to engage with a variety of audiences. So this campaign, in addition to the social media and advocacy component, it also had high-level lobbying. So to show authorities why this ecosystem was important and the need to protect it. And it's also a really great example of what the collaborative potential of what's possible when a group of people work together. And it also shows you the potential of social media, because by having a uniformed message, having a consistent visual style, and having content that everyone could share at the same time, really helped amplify the message, and also have streamline how the issue was communicated, so that there weren't different things being said about the same thing. Everyone was on the same page. So it's a really great example of how coalitions and groups working in the field can come together, and how we can really amplify and reach more people in this way. And just to wrap up, there are challenges when it comes to social media, and it's important. I mean, digital activism, it can really accelerate environmental communication and campaigning, and it's played a key role in affecting a lot of awareness and engagement. But because also conversations online reflect people's changing attitudes, and these attitudes sometimes do have the potential to affect officials or policymakers in reflecting those attitudes in the decisions that they make. So it's important to realize that there is all of that possibility, but measuring impact isn't always easy on social media, because a like or a follow, it doesn't always translate into behavior change. And it's not as easy to understand how many people have really grasped what you're trying to say. But it's part of a process, and it's moving the needle in the right direction, and hoping that we can realize that we all have a role to play within the larger environmental and conservation movement. So that's it from me. I apologize for all the glitches, and I'll hand it over to Vinod for final comments.
Thank you, Tasha. I was so glad you were able to get on. It would have been such a pity after all the hard work you put in to make this program a reality. So thank you very much. And there are questions, so I'll bring you back for question time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And can we have Vinod, please? Until Vinod comes on, I want to tell our audience, please put your comments and questions in the chat, because we have these 4 very dynamic individuals, and it would be a shame to lose the opportunity to ask them questions. Hi, Vinod, all yours for the wrap-up. Okay.
So we can go through, just jumping off what Tasha said at the end. So what are some of the challenges that we're faced with? These aren't the social media challenges that she talked about, but what are some of the other challenges? So one of the things that we've had is making, I guess, also getting, the biggest things was, I guess, getting into the community. And we've been fortunate enough, I guess, to find ourselves within that space through a few of individuals of ours who had jobs within the conservation community. But that's something that can prove to be a problem. But what we want people to do is to try to work collaboratively as much as possible. And this idea that we as a collective are moving forward, that's something that we really want to, has been a challenge for us, because there's so many different people working in silos and different projects. And what we're trying to do is, bring that information together and have it coming out as one. And then the other big one I would say is fundraising. Of course, as you could imagine, fundraising has been an issue, and that's where so many people can actually help out by even, donating a little bit of money, however much you can, towards environmental organizations working on the ground. Because if we were, we'll say, if everyone was to give, we'll say, a little bit of money, we'll say 1,000 rupees a year, or even if it's a little bit like money like that to different organizations, that as a collective is a lot of money that does come in then. And that's something that can be utilized for a lot of organizations that do work on shoestring budgets, who don't have a lot of funding coming in from external sources as well. And then, of course, working together collaboratively across, it's something that we strive to do as much as possible. Recommunicate science as opposed to creating our own content. What we will do is we'll recommunicate the science of another organization, thereby giving them content to use as well, and then also creating more stuff that can be pushed out around the board. So those are some of the ways, I guess, working collaboratively is one of the ways we do overcome some of the challenges that we face. So we'd like to say thank you to the British Council for having us. And if you'd like to, anyone like to get involved with us, please follow the social media handles that we have. And then, drop us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. So that's it from us, Minali, so you can open it up for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinod. So I think since you're on screen, I will ask you this. Somebody wants to know about the post-tsunami, post-tsunami, there was legislation, but they say it's very slow in being enacted. They just wanted to know your thoughts on this.
I mean, actually, so Sri Lanka has a lot of really good laws that, protect the wildlife. We've got the Flora and Fauna Protection Ordinance, the FFPO. We've got different acts that we have ratified. As as everyone's, I guess, potentially aware, a lot of it comes down to actually political will. And at the end of the day, if these things aren't looked at that level, it is a bit of an issue, because, I mean, citizens groups and organizations can do as much as they can, but it does come down to top-down change sometimes. That said, everyone can do their part, to give back to the community, to do whatever they can in their way. But a lot of the changes that actually can happen are, government changes, because they have the most amount of, clout within the country to do things. So a lot of those, even the laws exist, a lot of it isn't enacted, as we know, and that is a major issue that I think any conservation organization is faced with.
Thanks, Vinod. And I just want to shout out to Kale's reviews, because there is a question. I mean, there's a question that I do not understand. So if you would like to elaborate, but I mean, I'll just tell Vinod. They want to know what are processors, and it's spelled PROSESSORS.
Right. I mean, potentially it might have just been like the process that we use to go through. So we'll say once we have internal processors that we basically follow. So once a post comes in, we'll say when we're working with an organization, maybe the first point of contact might be myself or Yannick or Tasha. And then it's kind of how we walk through that. We have other members of our team then that engage with a conservation organization or an individual at that, and they're the one who then kind of handles the internal process that Parrotfish goes through, that Zev walked you through, to come to an end product. So it's like, I guess, our internal, how we come from A to Z, what we do to get there is what we would say is an internal process or processes that could be in what they talked about.
Sajid, can you also bring on Tasha? But I will ask Vinod. Someone wants to know whether there are any volunteer internship opportunities open.
Yeah, there definitely are. We are looking for people, so please get in touch with us. As you know, these days with the COVID situation in Sri Lanka, we don't have anything roll on. A lot of people are interested in doing a lot of hands-on activities, which is great. But again, it's kind of tough sometimes to get a lot of people out into the field as much as we'd like to. We'd love to have people getting out there, but sometimes again budgets do come into issue. Even if it was a normal time, sometimes it's hard. And some of the jobs available are behind the scenes, research jobs, content writing, potentially illustration, translators are always needed. So there are opportunities to volunteer with us. So please get in touch with us. You can either email us at parrotfishcollective@gmail.com or just drop us an Instagram message and we'll get in touch with you.
Okay. Tasha, somebody wants to know, how far does social media communications take you? Is the strategy aimed at awareness, or have there been instances where the public have been moved to on-ground actions?
That's a great question, I think, and it's something I sort of addressed at the end, where it is really difficult to measure impact or to show how what you're doing online is directly translating to on-the-ground issues. We hope with a lot of the work that we do online, it's about awareness, it's about education, it's about offering a nuanced perspective on something. So that is really important. How that translates into behavioral change is not as easy to identify all the time. But for example, as Vinod mentioned earlier, we had the Jungle Shirt campaign where people could engage with us online, and that sort of connected to the offline work, which was with the Kumana National Park. So there are ways that it can impact, for example, signing a petition. Or volunteering or donating, but it's not as easy or straightforward sometimes to see the direct link between putting up an Instagram post and mobilizing an audience for a huge issue, and that's something we are working towards, but it's not as easy.
Thanks, Tasha. I think if you can stay on screen if you like, but I've also asked Yannick to come on because I have a question for him about his photography. And please chip in. I mean, whenever, because you guys work so well together, if you have something to add to whatever somebody's saying, please feel free. Hi, Yannick. Welcome back. So,
hi, thanks.
Hi. So if anybody looks at your photographs that you have uploaded and that are available online, I think you have been a storyteller. You are a storyteller. And I think you decided to use your camera instead of pen and paper. I asked this because I read for the 5th time, I think, in my life, Gerald Darrell's The Corfu trilogy. And what he does with words, you seem to do with your pictures. And you talked a bit about it, but if you're a young person with no fancy camera and sort of nowhere great to go really, and you're locked in, how can they do what you do, but maybe from being stuck at home? How do they sort of tell their stories like the way you have chosen to tell your stories? Am I clear? Do you get what I'm saying? Because there's such a story in pictures. It's not just a photograph.
I do.
Okay.
I do get what you're saying, and I think I did touch upon it at the end there. I think the most important thing, or certainly for me, it's definitely the understanding or the passion or the desire to get to know your subject or to want to help or tell the story of the subject. It's that passion or desire that equates to better storytelling and creation of imagery. That's across the board. It could be a portrait, it could be of a human being, it can be images of wild animals in wild spaces, or it could be even in a studio setting with lighting. Even in that instance, the communication or the understanding of what it is, who it is that you're photographing is definitely advantageous to the creation of the story. So I would say understand your subject.
Okay, but how would a young person approach that? I mean, how did you approach it? How did you start? Because we are trying to encourage young people to engage, and a lot of people have camera phones now. So how can we get them to start this process?
Okay, so if I'm talking to that audience, I would say, photograph. Just keep at it, keep engaged, and try as much as you can. I think there's going to be a lot of times where things don't happen the way you expect. Photographs don't come through the way you expect. But the only way you can kind of overcome that or make something of it is by taking another photo. So engaging constantly and continually photographing, I would say, is the key there.
Okay. Thanks, Yannick. If you like, please stay on, because I'm going to ask Zev to come in, and I think the two of you feed off each other a lot when you do this work for the Parrotfish Collective, I think, because from what Zev was saying earlier. And can we have Zev on, please? Okay. So till we get Zev on, I also want to ask you, as a photographer, whose photography really moved you when you were young?
When I was young, there are a few that I've gone through the whole process of my photographic kind of exploration. But if I was going to mention one photographer that has influenced me and kind of driven where my photos have taken me, if you look up his work, you might see reflections of it in the work that I presented today. He's a photographer by the name of Brandt. I believe he's American. He spends a lot of his time in Africa. He's photographing animals, but he's photographing them on an analog camera, for starters, right? Film, but also with very short lenses. So he's up close and personal with animals in the wild, as if I was to photograph you, if I was to take your portrait, up close and personal. Because there's something about getting close and making a portrait that speaks much larger than if you were further away with a long lens. And I think I aspire to kind of emulate his work these days.
Okay, thanks, Yannick. And we have Zev on. Zev, there's a question for you, or a comment really. Thank you for wonderful caricatures, sending out subtle messages of change and awareness. So he says, Yannick must give you a run for your thoughts with his creative real-time images.
Yeah, look, it would be an issue if, sorry, let me try and line this up so you can all, how's the framing on this, Yannick?
Very good.
Acceptable, lighting, mild. There you go, that's how it happens. The real-time banter. You know, it's a really fun thing to go out in the field with a sketch pad and a camera and see what happens. I mean, you're seeing it. I don't have to tell you. It's like me giving banter to Yannick, him spurring me on, and we create things. It's great. And I think underpinning what we do is fun. And I think that's a really, really important lesson for all you watching along that want to get into this, that want to explore photography, want to explore social media, remember what I do and what Yannick does aren't the only creative things. We've got an incredible team of people behind us. Some of our members are unbelievably talented, some of the best in Sri Lanka, and I'm extremely grateful and lucky to work with them. But the thing that drives us all and brings us all together is this idea of play. Have fun. Get out there and just play with your medium. Try things out and get into it. If you're passionate about it, if you're passionate about what you do and you're excited, it'll happen. It'll happen. And also, you know, find a Yannick and follow them around the jungle. It works.
So you two actually do work kind of in tandem. Is that how you find like fodder for your cartoons? Is that actually how you do it, Zev? And then you have the humor and all of that happening at another level, or does Yannick feed into that as well?
I think Vinod. First of all, I think Vinod's the funny one out of everyone, so I'll just give him points for that. No, he's not. Yannick disagrees.
Zev is definitely the funny one, and I think it's, as Zev has harped on about this whole while, it's about collaborating, and it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, Mrinali.
Right.
You know, we might have an issue to talk about. We'll bring it to the table. We'll discuss it as a team, but don't let Zev fool you. Many a time he will come. You'll tell him, "Hey, we've got this. There's this issue. It needs discussion. We need to talk about it. These are the bullet points. These are my thoughts." He'll go away. He'll come back, as his sketchbook showed, with 10 different, you know. And I think when we're discussing what we're going to talk about today, it's conceptualizing of the issue that is really the most important part, because there are people who can draw and there are people who can take photographs, and a variety of drawings, right? Good, bad, pretty, nostalgic. And what Zev does really well is conceptualize an idea. And I think that's the key point.
And that is one of the toughest things. And I love what Zev said, that, you know, through humor and not patronizing people, you can really make them think about very important things. And I think that is so important.
Mrinali, can I just add one thing onto that? That I think there's a real value in what we do. I was a bit like, I get quite nervous public speaking about art. Any artists out there listening know exactly what I'm talking about. You get pretty nervous, but I think there's a real value in what we do. There's a space in Sri Lanka for this kind of work. It's extremely important to be able to re-communicate and communicate. And I think I'm really grateful to the team and everyone else, because between us, we're able to hit those much deeper levels, that really serious content in playful ways. So again, I agree with everyone. Don't let the playfulness and the fun sort of fool you. What we're doing is extremely serious and also valuable work. And hopefully you've, through the journey we've taken you on the last hour, that you'll see that what we do is really value add to the conversation here and in Sri Lanka and globally.
Thank you. I think I will close. There are no more questions coming in, except there's one about photography for documenting biodiversity is increasingly important. Are any of you familiar with the fantastic contributions being made documenting Sri Lanka's biodiversity on Naturalist? I guess I should ask the two of you, because you two seem to be sort of more the visual aspect of this. So that's a question.
Tasha is an incredible photographer as well, so I know she's hiding somewhere. You can ask her.
Oh, okay. Tasha?
I'm just going to go off screen now. You can ask her.
Yeah, bring Tasha on screen. I haven't heard of iNaturalist myself. It seems interesting. I might have to check it out. But I do agree with you. Photography is certainly increasingly important in telling stories that, as I mentioned, might not be so obvious.
Okay, and Tasha, before I go on to iNaturalist, Manika asks, how do communities at the front line, that is, people affected by the human-elephant conflict, for instance, receive you? What are their expectations and how do you engage with them? Did you hear me?
Yeah, I did. I think this is a question for Vinod, though.
Okay.
Yes, I think question for Vinod.
All right. So can we have Vinod? I don't know whether Vinod heard my question. Vinod, did you hear
Hi,
my
Manali.
question?
Yeah, I did hear your question.
Okay.
I can see the question. I mean, how do we receive you? I mean, Manika, I think what we try to do is also don't ever go in with an attitude of kind of we know better than you or anything like that. It's kind of finding that middle ground and using different disciplines. So we try to have like a little bit of a anthropological lens where we do ask questions and try to understand, because there's no one size fits all answer. It's very different in different spaces. So what we try to do is do ask questions and create a dialogue. It's a engagement process that we go through to understand these things. And what are their expectations, and how do you? So I guess a lot of the expectations is that that crops don't get raided or by elephants coming through. But again, sometimes they are living in. They have been relocated in some cases into areas where elephants do traverse quite often. And then sometimes, because of deforestation, elephants are coming into more contact with humans. So that again is another issue. So what we try to do is then talk to them about potential alternatives, which we've looked at. Which a lot of organizations actually working in this space are looking at another means of offering farmers, will say, an alternative of when like as Yannick showed the picture of the crops being burnt before. During that time, if you don't, we'll say, burn the crops, the elephants will pass through that area. So potentially putting up a tree house that people could sit in to look at the elephants, and then those farmers as well get a added income from those elephants passing through that land. So there are alternative ways of looking at things, and what we do talk about is some of these opportunities. A lot of it again requires on the ground activity, as well as funding to actually go ahead and trickle down into these things. So that's why donating towards organizations. If you care about the environment in Sri Lanka, I would say one of the biggest things is trying to donate a little bit of money to the organizations working on the ground, and making that connect of, I love my country, how can I give back? Here's a potential way of giving back by giving some money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're very pleased. We have, thank you, Vinod, for that response. And we're very pleased. We have Asha DeVos, who's watching us. And she says, iNaturalist is a platform for crowdsourcing sightings of species. You can also submit a photo of species that you can't identify, and someone else will. So thanks for that, Asha. And I don't think I have any more. Oh, okay, I have one more. A lot of environmental destruction has political involvement. How do you engage with these systemic issues?
So what we try to do is, I mean, again, like we talked about, is to kind of stay non-political as much as possible, and offer.
Yeah.
Because how we see it, Minali, is like if we can actually get a seat at the table, and that in itself allows us at least to voice our opinion. Being kind of hardlined and getting yourself shut out sometimes, going on that hardline activist front sometimes doesn't work as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what we're thinking about is taking a neutral stance and always trying to offer pragmatic, realistic solutions that can be implemented. So even when we did the Protect Vida campaign, one of the things we talked about was, what are the negative impacts of aquaculture? But we also said, here are some positives that, that ecosystem can give you. So when we did lobby with the government, with the entire coalition did lobby with the government, what we were saying was, look here, there are other ways of making income from these wetland areas and mangroves. So don't go in and just look at it for short-term gain. So, and it was very good, because a lot of that project has been so far put on hold, and it seems like Vida continues to receive protection. So what we try to do is just continue to have a seat at the table by having non-hardline views, as well as offering solutions, I would say, is how we try to do that as much as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think I have no more questions in the chat, and I won't tax you anymore because you guys have been on for a very long time. Thank you very much for joining me, and I think I will just wrap up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Minali.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
So as I said, thank you to Vinod and Zev and Yannick and Tasha for their passion and for generously coming on. And, they took a lot of time and made a lot of effort to put this program together for us and to share their experiences and their expertise. So we wish them greater strength and success to continue their pursuit for making a better world for all of us. And if any of you want to join them and partner in their efforts and contribute, you can contact them via Facebook or Instagram, and they also have a YouTube channel. So check them out and contact them if you want to volunteer your time or your effort. And I want to say a very big thank you to our wonderful audience. You have been very interactive and you've asked a lot of questions and joined the discussion, which was what we were aiming for. And we're very grateful that you've stayed all this time with us. So thank you very much for taking time on a Sunday afternoon. And thank you to Sajid, as always, for handling the tech and for being the quiet sort of strength behind the scenes. And if you want to know more about our programs, you can always look at the British Council Sri Lanka webpage or our Facebook page. We always post up notices on events that we have planned for the coming months. Next month, we will also have a similar program. So please do join us then. And also, if you are missing out on your reading and missing getting to libraries which are closed now because of the pandemic, we have a wonderful digital library online, and it has a huge collection of all sorts of resources, including movies and audiobooks and ebooks and magazines and newspapers and lots of books on nature and conservation and lots of resources, including academic journals. So please do check out our digital library. And thank you to everyone who joined us, and I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you.